In part number 1, we'll talk about what strength training is. So we'll be talking about sort of reps, sets, and loads. So strength training is basically it's heavy lifting. Now, if we are talking about certainly bone health, very specifically bone health, and maintaining bone density and bone mass, we need to be talking about heavy strength training. A lot of exercise advertising, you will see, maintains bone health against most forms of exercise. Now, that may be true, but it depends on the state of the bones as you go into it. And I'll sort of explain what that means as we go through, or you'll start to understand what that means as we go through. So, the basic journey of bones, when you're born, they're cartilage. As you grow into adolescence or into childhood, they turn from that cartilage into bone. These bones then obviously get longer and thicker and wider. By the time you get to 25, you've kind of got the let's just say like the biggest, strongest, thickest bones that you'll have, if that makes sense. Now, how thick, long and strong they are will depend on the activity that you've done. When you get to the sort of mid-20s, if you did nothing, it will start to sort of tail off and drop as you get older. So basically, after your sort of mid-20s, your bone density and bone mass will start to drop. How we go about slowing that drop is heavy strength training, or that is the best form of exercise for it. Now, with regards to what that looks like, basically, it's the weight you can lift for 6 reps. So it's roughly an 80% of your 1 rep max. So if you could lift one time 100 kilos, your 6 rep max would be 85 kilos, there or thereabouts. So now you don't have to do a 1 rep max to be able to get there. You can sort of do it the other way. You can do it the way that I'm going to kind of describe in the next part. So it's heavy strength training. So again, if we just sort of go back to what I was talking about before, if you're at sort of 25, 35, 45, that sort of age, you want to maintain bone health into your 50s, 60s, 70s. Now, even if you're in your 50s, 60s and 70s and you want to maintain your bone health and potentially grow it a little bit stronger, then you're going to need to do strength training. For the very simple reason that your bones respond to that stress, to that load. And it will lay down more minerals and therefore more bone. And I'll talk about bone more specifically in another podcast, how it's built, what it's made out of, so on and so forth. So with regards to if you've got a good sort of bone density now, then you'll probably need to do heavy strength training. 85% of 1 rep max, 6 reps, 3 to 5 sets of heavy exercises. Now, if you have sort of osteoporotic bones, or your bones are weaker, or you haven't done any exercise in a long time, then your 6 rep max, obviously it will be heavy because it's all relative, but it won't be sort of big heavy weights that I'm going to describe in another part. Again, it's all relative. And then as your bones and muscles get stronger, this will then sort of build the weight up. So it may be a light weight, but that light weight may be your 6 rep max, if that makes sense. So essentially what we are looking for is heavy strength training. If you see, for example, now this is nothing against Pilates, but if you see good for building bone health or maintaining bone health in Pilates and you're of a good health and fitness, then it's not going to do that for your bones. It may do it for sort of weakened bones, but it won't do it for healthy bones because the load just isn't there. It can challenge the muscles and those types of things, but the load just isn't there to build a big femur, which is the main bone in your leg, or your shin bones, or your humerus bone, or your forearm bones. It's just not going to do it. So you need to be lifting heavy, and that means possibly screwing up your face and really sort of shifting some heavy weight. So that's kind of what it needs to look like. Now, as I mentioned, it's a 6 rep max. So how do we get to our 6 rep max? Well, there's a few ways of getting into it. Now, if we just take exercise and we don't do any sort of assessment or anything like that, so we're not going to do a 1 rep max test or a 6 rep max test or anything like that. We're just going to sort of use exercise. There are a few precursors that we need. We need good core strength and stability. So we may not even start with heavy strength training. We may just start with building up the core strength. So as an example, if someone comes to me and they have a specific goal of sort of building bone health or maintaining bone health, maintaining of a muscle mass that they've got, then I would need to look at, okay, well, first of all, we need to build some bits and pieces because we need the core strength. Because it's heavy training, what we don't want is a weak torso but strong legs. So we want the torso to be as strong as the legs. So when we come to lift, the legs may be able to lift it, but we get a sagging torso or a bending torso as we lift. We don't want that. We need that rigidity through the torso. So we need to build up that core strength and the endurance in it as well. What we may also need to build, because we're going to be talking about some specific exercises that are sort of better than others for the reasons that I'm going to describe, we may need to build some range of movement, or we may need to adapt the exercises accordingly. But essentially, we need to build a necessary range of movement required to lift the weight. So if we're lifting something off the floor, we need the necessary range of movement to be able to get down there so we don't compromise the body. Because we're lifting heavy weights, that puts us at a higher risk of injury, which we'll sort of talk a little bit more about later on. And then what we would need to do with regards to reps and sets, so we start with the core strength, we build that up, we start building and sort of improving range of movement. When it comes to the actual lifting, what we would do is you would start at a higher rep. So you may start 12 reps and just do the exercises at that rep range. Then you can go a little bit heavier and take it to 8 reps. So let's just say your 12 rep max is 50 kilos. So let's just assume your 1 rep max is 100. 50% of that is 50 kilos. So we start you there. Then we take you down to 8 reps. So we move up to 65 kilos. And then eventually we take you into the 6 rep max, which is going to be about 80, 85 kilos, which is where we want to be. So we're building through that in stages. So we're not just throwing you in the deep end and building sort of out and out strength, because again, the body's going to respond to that and it may not respond to that in the most favourable way. It may be a little bit harder to do that. So we've got the precursors of the building of the core strength and stability and the endurance through there. Again, if there's any sort of back pain in the system or if any muscle tightness around the back, then we're going to need to sort that out as well. But we're also going to need joint range of movement, so we may need to build that up as well. And then finally, the final step is as we get into the 12 rep training, it's then as we go down 10, 8 and 6, we build the weight up accordingly to match that sort of 85 rep max. And by going that way, if we don't know what your 1 rep max is, if we build that way, 12, 10, 8, 6, basically when you get to rep 6, you may be able to do 1 more, and that's about it. And that is a maybe. If it's a true 6 rep max, obviously you won't be able to do any more. But if you have 1 left in the tank, you know you're in the right area. because on that last one, it may just be complete failure and it all falls to pieces. So if you know you've got one in the bank, you know you can do 6 with the proper positions of the body, the proper range of movement, so on and so forth. So with regards to strength training, we kind of know now what it is. 85% of our 1 rep max. So if our 1 rep max is 100 kilos, it's 85 kilos. We know we've got some precursors, and which are core strength, stability and endurance. Then we may have to build some range of movement. We may have to sort out any back pain or muscle tightness that's there as well. And then we also know how to build into it. We start at 12 reps, go to 10, 8 and 6. And each time we do that over a period of weeks, we take the weight up. And then when we get to that 6 rep, if we know we've got 1 left in the bank, or we may have 1 left in the bank, we know we've got the right weight because we know we can complete 6 with the proper positions. What we'll do next is talk about sort of better and worse exercises.